All right, so every once in a while, which I mean like basically every day, I get down a super deep Reddit rabbit hole.
Yeah, sure.
And a most recent one was authored by East Coast Taffy. Hope I have that username correctly. And it was all about how we all say Kyle Shanahan has this running back by committee approach. No, when he has a guy, was authored by East Coast Taffy.
By East Coast Taffy.
Tubbsy, we're famous. Coming into the 2021 season, Ezekiel Elliott was one of the most controversial guys projected to be a first-round draft pick in fantasy. Lots of people wanted nothing to do with him, while a lot of other people anticipated a rebound year. Zeke was coming off of a season where he saw the lowest usage rate of his entire career, as well as the lowest efficiency of his entire career. Even still, he played a ton of snaps, in fact the most of any running back, and that volume allowed him to finish as an RB1 in every scoring format. Adding to that, the fact that 2020 was pretty much a lost season for the Cowboys once Dak Prescott went down, and it just made things even more confusing for us. Was Zeke's down year caused by his offense being so one-dimensional, with guys like Andy Dalton, Ben DiNucci, and Garrett Gilbert starting at quarterback? Were the injuries on the offensive line just too much to overcome? Was Zeke simply wearing down as he approached 2,000 NFL touches? We didn't have the answers to those questions, but most people assumed one thing was for certain. What we saw in 2020 was Zeke's floor. While he might not ever reclaim his place near the top of the heap of fantasy options, what he just gave us had to be his worst case scenario. So it made sense to most people to take that guaranteed RB1 in the first round, with the upside of that elite production that we've seen from Zeke in the past. Well, through the first 2 weeks of the season, that guaranteed floor is not looking quite so guaranteed. Tony Pollard has emerged in this backfield as much more of a complement to Zeke rather than a backup to Zeke, and Pollard has been by far the more explosive and efficient running back. While the season is still very young, many fantasy players are sounding the alarm on their first round pick. Could we be seeing the beginning of the end for Zeke? And is Pollard the new running back to own in Dallas? What's up, guys? So I was finishing editing up this video and I saw some news that broke that kind of stopped me in my tracks, and I feel like I really should mention it. Mike Tagliere passed away today after a pretty long battle with COVID. You probably know Mike as like the figurehead over at Fantasy Pros, and I'm not going to talk about this all selfish about how, oh, this sucks for me because now I don't get his fantasy advice anymore. This sucks just way more for other reasons. Namely, he leaves behind a wife and 2 young kids. So there's been a GoFundMe set up to help support his family. I've linked it in the description. I suggest you guys consider donating. Also, I'll link his wife's Twitter handle, Tabby. You can reach out to her there and send her your kind words there. This COVID shit is just no joke, obviously. I mean, I'm sure a ton of you guys have lost a loved one to it. I nearly lost my mom to it, so I just want to say, fuck COVID. But, yeah, that being said, I know this is a horrible segue. It has nothing to do with my video, but I just wanted to really quickly pay respects to a guy who, even though I never met him, never even talked to the guy, he was still a part of my life. Like every day I listened to him, so it kind of feels like I lost a friend. Also, the way he worked his ass off and broke his way into the industry is part of the reason why I decided to chase my dreams and start growing my channel. So thanks for everything, Tags. Rest in peace, man. And now let's get back to my stupid fucking video. In week 1, Zeke only saw 11 carries on only 13 total opportunities, even though he played on a whopping 70 snaps. Now, let me just break down just how unprecedented that kind of usage is for Zeke. Those 13 opportunities tied a career low. Even though that snap count of 70, he's only surpassed that 5 times over his entire career. And in those 5 games, he's averaged about 30 opportunities per game. So in week 1, he was on the field a ton, but he got by far the lowest usage rate he's ever seen in his whole career. Now, part of that can definitely be chalked up to the matchup because the Buccaneers have the best run defense in the league, so it just didn't make a ton of sense for the Cowboys to try to run Zeke up the middle against them. Most of what Zeke did in week 1 was simply pass blocking. Because Dak was throwing the ball a ton, he actually set a career high with 58 pass attempts, and they had a lot of success doing that. The few runs that Zeke did get were mostly stuffed by Tampa's front seven, and apart from one run where he was able to get to the outside edge and rip off a quick 13 yards, Zeke's other 10 carries went for just 20 total yards, and he just didn't look very good on the edge trying to make people miss one-on-one. On the other hand, Pollard was able to flash his talent on very limited opportunities, with the Cowboys having a handful of design plays to get him in space and show off his burst. He actually put up more total yards than Zeke, even while just getting about half of the opportunities that Zeke got, but he didn't do anything too crazy, so the vibes were still pretty high on Zeke. Overall, week 1 was disappointing for Zeke for sure, but it was something that a lot of us expected based on the matchup. I would bet that every single Zeke owner across the entire planet got at least one trade offer for him after that game, and he was pretty much the favorite trade target for everybody across the fantasy industry because this just had to be as bad as it could get for him, right? Well, in week 2, Pollard put every Zeke owner on full red alert. Sure, Zeke saw a few more touches and his yards per carry shot up a bit, and plus he fell into the end zone, so he had a fine fantasy day, but Pollard was the better back in week 2. Even though Pollard's snaps only increased a tiny bit, he closed the gap in terms of opportunities, seeing 16 to Zeke's 18. And he was way more efficient, way more explosive, and for the second week in a row, he put up more total yards than Zeke, even while seeing less opportunities than him. Pollard turned his 13 carries into 109 rushing yards, and even if we take away his long run of 28 yards, the rest of his carries still went for about 7 yards per carry. Zeke, on the other hand, if we take away his long run, which was 19 yards, his yards per carry would drop to about 3.5, which is like half of what Pollard put up. Also, Pollard made it 2 weeks in a row where he was the running back that was more involved in the passing game, and the Cowboys again made an effort to have designed plays for Pollard to get him in space. Now, Zeke still served as the power back on this offense, but even there, Pollard kind of encroached on that role a little bit. He converted a 3rd and short with a run right up the gut, and he ran really strong through contact, breaking tackles and consistently falling forward to the point that the Cowboys probably aren't opposed to keep mixing him into that role going forward. Another interesting thing to mention is that we saw the Cowboys line up both Zeke and Pollard on the field at the same time, multiple times. Head coach Mike McCarthy is no stranger to multiple running back sets, and these kinds of formations are really potent down around the goal line. Like we can see on this play right here, the defense has to account for Zeke's powerful vertical running, Pollard's side-to-side pressure, and the QB keeper if Dak decides to pull the ball down for himself, which is a lot to process in a split second. Now that kind of defensive quagmire really benefits the most explosive player in the bunch, which in this case is Pollard, since if the ball is going to him and the defense makes even one tiny mistake, he has the burst to make them pay for that mistake every single time. And that's exactly what we saw here. Now the Cowboys have already gone to this well a few times so far in the season, so I expect plenty of 2 running back sets going forward, especially in the red zone, and both running backs should find some success on these because these kind of plays just put so much stress on the defense. So looking ahead at week 3 and going forward in the rest of the season, what does all this mean for Zeke? Well, in terms of week 3, he's traditionally done really well against the Eagles, and in a primetime matchup against a division rival, you should feel pretty good about starting him. However, all of that success against the Eagles has come with a really big workload, as he's averaged over 27 opportunities per game against the Eagles. I don't think we see anything close to that kind of workload, especially since we're dealing with a similar situation to what happened in week 1. The Eagles have a good run defense. Their defensive line is aging, but it's still great, and importantly, it's way better than their pass defense. I could absolutely see the Cowboys going to a really pass-heavy attack in week 3, and they already showed us that they're completely okay with cutting Zeke's carries out if they think that's what gives them the best chance of winning. I expect Dak Prescott to just carve up this Eagles pass defense, and the running backs won't really need to be a focal point of the game plan, so the volume probably won't be there for Zeke to have one of his trademark huge games. Also, Pollard's ability to put that side-to-side horizontal pressure on the defense should be really effective against this kind of front, where it's forcing the outside linebackers to try to make tackles in space. So I think the Cowboys are going to go to him again, and we might see another really concerning set of usage between the two backs if you're a Zeke owner, even if Zeke manages to find the end zone. As for the rest of the season, I'm not overreacting here. Zeke is not washed, and he's not getting traded or cut anytime soon. He looks good in his role, it's just that right now, that role isn't one that we've seen Zeke fill in the past. The main appeal for Zeke in the past in fantasy has been his guaranteed workload, and that's just taken a huge hit this season. The team showed us in week 1, and I expect them to show it again in week 3, that they're okay with cutting out his carries in certain matchups. Also, a huge part of his value has come from his pass catching role, and that shrunk as well for a couple reasons. 1, because Dak is slinging it downfield more than ever, and 2, because Pollard is the one that's getting featured in the passing game out of the two backs. You can argue whether or not you think Zeke has lost a step, but the more important issue here is that the team has evolved around him, and there's actually a ton of room for them to work Pollard into the offense even more. As of right now, Pollard is cutting into Zeke's workload without even playing a ton of snaps. Even though his snap rate increased pretty decently from week 1 to week 2, he only actually logged snap counts of 20 and 21 in those games. That could absolutely go up, and probably should go up, if he keeps producing the way he has been, and that would cut down on Zeke's upside even more. Now, make no mistake, Zeke is still a huge part of this team going forward. He's best friends with the face of the franchise, and his huge 6-year, $90 million contract actually just kicked in this season. Now, that might seem crazy since he signed it so long ago, but back when he signed it, he still had 1 year left to play on his rookie deal, and the team had already exercised his 5th year option for the following season. So he's actually under contract until 2026, which would make him 31 by the time the deal is over. Now, with the way the deal is structured, I kind of doubt that he actually plays out the whole thing, but he's definitely going to be here for at least the next 2 years before any moves are made. And he's going to be a focal point on a team that's entering its Super Bowl window. As for Pollard's contract situation, he's still on his rookie deal until the end of 2022, and with the Cowboys' current cap situation, they shouldn't have any problem re-signing him if they want to. If you've been following the trends of winning football teams, the ones that want to make deep playoff pushes, they don't use a bell cow. I think the days of Zeke averaging 20 plus touches a game are over, and that kind of hurts to hear for those of us who drafted him in the first round. But that's not to say he won't still be relevant as a starter in fantasy, and he's still going to have some huge games whenever the team goes to him around the goal line. The main difference for Zeke now is that we just have to temper our expectations based on certain matchups, and that's just unfamiliar territory for Zeke owners. For the longest time, the Dallas backfield was bell cow backup, but nowadays I think it's going to be looking a lot more like the Cleveland backfield with Chubb and Hunt. Going forward, I don't think it's a bad idea at all to try to sell high on Zeke, especially if someone in your league sees him have a big game. Maybe he has a big game this week, and someone in your league thinks that he still has that super high-end upside to finish in the top 5, like we've seen him do so many times. But I wouldn't be panicking and trying to sell low on him right now, that's for sure. He might not be the guy you drafted him to be, but he's not going to get phased out of this offense completely in favor of Pollard. Zeke is still going to have a huge role here. As for Pollard, he's a guy that you can actually start right now and probably feel pretty good about it in some matchups. Also, just like we thought coming into this season, Pollard has some of the highest upside of any running back who isn't at the top of their team's depth chart. If Zeke ever gets injured, Pollard instantly becomes a lock of a must start, and he even has pretty good value right now even while Zeke is healthy. I would not be trying to sell Pollard high right now because a lot of his value is potential value, and you probably won't be able to get enough back to make it worth sending out that kind of upside. And for those of you who own both Zeke and Pollard, it kind of sucks to say, but you just have to be okay with some weeks starting both guys if they're in really plus matchups. Like, for example, a few weeks down the line, they play the Vikings. I could see both guys having great games. But there's also some matchups, like week 3 especially, where you'd have to be okay with starting Pollard over Zeke. Sure, Zeke is always going to be a threat to fall into the end zone, but I think in matchups where the Cowboys are going to scheme more towards Pollard than Zeke, Pollard's going to be effective in those matchups. They know what they're doing, and as much as it sucks to do it, you might have to bench your first round pick for his backup. Now, I might be totally crazy. I might be proven completely wrong even as soon as Monday Night Football against the Eagles, but just with the way things are going in the modern NFL, teams that really want to make deep playoff pushes, they have to kind of preserve their running backs for that push. I think it makes sense for them to do that because they're in a weak division that they should be able to win for the next couple years consecutively without much pushback. And if they want to make those deep playoff pushes, they're going to need guys like Zeke to be fully healthy going into the postseason. If the Cowboys were to continue giving Zeke the usage he's had over his whole career so far, by the time his contract would end in Dallas, he would be like the 3rd or 4th most touches in NFL history. And you just don't do that in the modern league. As much as it sucks for those of us, me included, who took Zeke at like the 106, this isn't the same Zeke from years past, not because he's lost a step, but just because he doesn't have the same role anymore. That role that Zeke used to play in previous years, he was sort of one of the last of a dying breed in terms of bell cow running backs, and I think we've lost another one. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. Please give me some feedback in the comments what you thought about this one. The feedback I got from my last week's video on Elijah Mitchell was just amazing. Thank you so much. It's that kind of feedback that makes me want to keep grinding this channel, keep growing it, and it is growing. We're on our way to 10,000 subscribers, so thank you guys for that. Also, as always, on Tuesdays, my waiver wire videos are going to be coming out with all the every play videos, as well as a wrap-up video where I talk about each guy. Also, the article that I post on Reddit comes out every Tuesday morning with write-ups on all the waiver pickups and links to all of their every play videos. So stay lookout for that, and I'll be back next week with another analysis video. So thanks guys, and I'll see you in the next one.